Hi, my name is Chris with Protip, and we're here with Peter Lay today talking about his experience as a martial artist. Hi, Peter. Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks
Um,
for having me.
yeah, I'm excited to talk to you about it. And I was going to start with just a really easy question. If you could tell us a little bit about kind of yourself and what started you on your martial arts journey.
Yeah, I've been doing martial arts and combat sports for a very long time.
Yeah,
Um, I would say like over 10 years, and in much of that, uh, there's been like a lot of coaching and things like that, which is pretty apt for pro tip. Um,
yeah. You said you were doing a bit of coaching yourself and helping folks with fight prep and that kind of thing.
So I
Yeah,
started off doing like traditional martial arts. So this
yeah,
really came out of being a fan of different martial arts movies,
yeah.
watching like kung fu movies with my brother. So we signed up for kung fu.
Okay.
Um, and I remember my first sparring session. I mean, it was back in the days where like the training didn't really match like the intended outcome, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So we
I
did a
remember
lot of
doing some,
forms. We did a lot
yeah,
of like non-compliant or very like low resistance drills. And I remember doing
yeah.
my first sparring session, and I got wrecked.
Oh no. Yeah. Yeah.
And it was like not a surprise. Like I was just like, okay, like clearly I wasn't prepared for this. So
Right.
um, I went to college, and from there I kind of picked my martial arts that I was more interested in. So
Yeah. So you
I
said
yeah, go
you
ahead.
started in Kung Fu, is that what you said?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so I kept doing some traditional stuff, but when I got to college, I was trying out a lot of different martial arts like kickboxing and jujitsu, and I was really interested in those as well.
Yeah.
So I gravitated towards like striking um, pretty naturally. Um, Started doing MMA, um,
Yeah.
Sanda type things, and eventually, like, kind of started focusing more on striking. So now I basically just practice Muay Thai.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like I just was my love of Muay Thai is that I just really enjoy the striking. I did say some jujitsu as well, but yeah, I felt like same. I really gravitated towards Muay Thai. Um, but they're quite different sports. And I totally get your point about how some other martial arts maybe don't necessarily prepare you for like actual sparring or competition. I did a little aikido when I was younger, and I remember it didn't translate as well into like a competition experience. I feel like Muay Thai is such a good striking sport because it's like a proper ring sport, you know.
Hmm.
Um, do you sort of have a favorite among them? I mean, it sounds like maybe you were saying Muay Thai.
Yeah, I would say Muay Thai and MMA were the ones that I was really more into.
Yeah,
Um, I think like with all of them, I have like a very different experience. Like with some of my earliest coaching experience was for like more of the traditional martial arts. So
yeah,
that's so important and impactful for me overall. But definitely like the most rewarding training came from the combat sports. There's
yeah,
just so much to learn. It's You get like a lot of very clear feedback, right?
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah. That's for sure. And then so it sounds like you've trained at probably a few different gyms over your martial arts career. I was kind of curious about maybe some gyms you've liked, and also how do you pick a gym and what do you look for in a gym? I know I hear from a lot of people who are starting martial arts and they're really unsure how to know if a new gym is any good or how they kind of decide. It's kind of curious what you look for in a gym.
yeah, so like I said, I train a lot at college, and those are actually like student run clubs.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
so that was an interesting experience, which is like very different from going to look for like a professional gym.
Yeah.
But I think looking for gym, I wanted some of those vibes where it's like a pretty
Yeah. Yeah.
um, friendly vibe with people that you can get along with, as
Yeah.
well
I
as
feel like
like
if you're gonna get in a ring and spar with somebody, you got to be able to trust them.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um, So like, people around my age always helped.
Yeah,
Um, as far as like the more like, what do I look for when I go to a gym? Um, I really look at like a coach's resume, and that's not necessarily a fight record, but um, more of just like where they trained. I'll kind of like dig through social media. Uh, there wasn't as
yeah,
much back in the day, but I'll look for training footage and things like that. And if I like their style of like communication or the content that they teach, I'll be really into it.
yeah. Kind of get the
Um,
vibe of the gym that way.
yeah.
I know a lot of the gyms that I've been to will do like 1 week trials, which is a nice way to get a feel for kind of the culture of the gym.
So it's like coaches' credentials, whatever culture they have, um,
Yeah,
a curriculum and content of their teaching, and like cleanliness. Like there's some gyms I've been to that are like pretty good, but they smell really
yeah.
bad or they're very unsanitary, and that's not.
Yeah, I've experienced that. I was at a gym I won't name that was early days and very small, and I remember the building was so small and humid that you basically have like sweat dripping from the roof during like heavy training, and it was just gross.
Yeah. But as far as gyms that I've really enjoyed, like I enjoy my main gym, which is actually one of the first combat sports gyms I visited, which is Fairfax Jiu Jitsu in Northern Virginia.
Okay, yeah,
So I was attracted to that gym because of their MMA program specifically. I saw that the coach, Bill Easlick, who's one of my big, martial arts role models in general,
yeah,
he had Sanda experience, and I was really interested in that style. I think prior, because Kung Fu has like the combative component in mainland China, which is
yeah,
Sanda or Sanshao, which is more or less kickboxing with wrestling. Um, and so I thought it was really cool that he had that unique background. Um,
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I don't think you see that as much. The Sanda and the Sanchow. I don't think you see as much available. At least I haven't seen it much on the West Coast
right.
here. But I did meet a few guys who were doing, I think, sort of Sancho,
Hmm.
and yeah, it seemed like it was similar. Maybe the pacing is a bit different, and yeah, I guess the you actually do ground fighting as well. Is that right?
There's no ground fighting, but there's more takedowns allowed than
Okay.
in Muay Thai. Like you can
Yeah.
do double legs and things like that.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and outside of Fairfax Jiu Jitsu, I would say, I mean, I've traveled all over the world and visited various gyms. I
Yeah.
liked training in Thailand at Sijalpo. I liked some of the gyms I went to in Japan and Taiwan. So it's almost like I can describe what I dislike more than what I
Yeah.
like.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's interesting. How was training in Thailand?
Pretty good. Um, I haven't done like my ideal like couple months or years in Thailand, but definitely
Right.
like the average level of everyone is a lot higher.
I imagine.
Um,
Yeah.
the environment is different because like in the US you're training in an environment where there's like probably one or two coaches, like there's like a lesson, everyone's like expected to be there for like only an hour or two and then go home
Right.
to their normal life. But everyone in Thailand is like either they've been they were a former fighter, they're a fighter, or they're like a huge hobbyist or nerd or like
Yeah.
potential fighter who's visiting Thailand. So
So you probably get pretty high skill levels across the board.
high skill levels or like high commitment, which is a
Yeah.
big deal.
Yeah. I'm sure a higher level of athleticism. I know. Just from my experience with my gym and with coaching, I'd have students who were, like you said, coming in for an hour, get a little workout and go home,
Hmm.
versus folks who are, training mornings and nights and, 5 days a week. Uh, yeah.
Yeah, I think like the probably the biggest difference is just like when you're training Muay Thai in Thailand, unless you're like partying and stuff too, like um, everyone is there. like focusing on Muay Thai. Like that's why they're at the gym.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
Whereas in the U.S., like even if you have a high skill level or good athletes there, like you're just like there's more distractions. So
For sure. Yeah. um, let's see. I'm gonna ask you a bit about coaching. So you said you do some coaching yourself, and obviously you've worked with a bunch of coaches. I was wondering what it is that you think makes someone like a really great coach.
mhm. Yeah, so I think great coaches like they have a vision of um like what they want to teach, and they have like the means to communicate that vision to their
Mm-hmm.
students. um so whether or not like they really care about having a fight team, or they are max into like the technique, or they want to build an environment where like you know either it's like a fun environment or like a very like serious environment. It's like their intent is there,
Yeah.
and they have like a plan.
Yeah.
I really think those people tend to be more successful. There's a lot of coaches I've seen that were like good fighters or good athletes or whatever, but they're not very good at coaching.
Yeah. I guess it doesn't always translate. Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes they kind of just run through exercises or drills or the training structure that they were given, but they
Yeah.
don't really know the intent behind those things. So it's limiting that way. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then like general communication skills and knowing like what a fighter or a student or customer in general, like what they need or what they want. Um,
Yeah. So I was curious about maybe some coaches that have been kind of the biggest influence for you, if you've had any
mhm.
that kind of stand out.
Yeah. My MMA coach, Bill, was definitely a big standout. Like I spent a lot of time with him. Um, he's a very technical guy, a very verbal, um, tough love, that sort
Oh
of
yeah.
thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, which like I can respond to very well. Now some people don't respond to that,
Yeah.
but he's able to kind of switch modes if that's the
That's
case.
good. Yeah. Yeah.
My current Muay Thai coach, Matt, he's very dedicated to Muay Thai. Um, and there's been like a number of people that I've recognized as very good coaches, but I haven't like worked that much with them.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
I see.
so one of my biggest influences for coaching is a guy that probably doesn't even know my name, but I've been to a bunch of not a bunch, but a couple of jujitsu seminars
Yeah.
by Andrew Smith, who is a jujitsu coach from Richmond, Virginia,
Oh.
and just the way that he put together his seminars was very professional, very put together, very cohesive and comprehensive. And I was like, wow, like he's got all the bases covered. So
Yeah.
I mean, aspire to that.
Oh, that's great.
Um, some other coaches, Barry Robinson, who is like a boxing MMA coach. He's controversial online, and
Oh yeah.
he's actually uh, banned me from his Patreon gym.
Oh no.
But that's because he has very high standards, a
Okay.
very specific standards. But
Yeah.
um, he's one of the only coaches talking about base positioning, um, those sorts of things that you hear more in the jujitsu and grappling realm, but applied to striking. So
Yeah, interesting.
I find that very interesting. That
Yeah.
informs a lot of the way I coach now.
Oh, that's awesome. Kind of moving through some more questions here, but I think you really hit on a lot of the coach stuff. Um, so I'm going to switch into a little bit about competition. So you've competed. You said you fight.
A couple times, a couple amateur fights, yeah.
Okay, yeah. And then how? Well, I'm kind of curious about a bunch of things. Like, was that something when you got into martial arts that you were curious about competing to start with, or is it kind of something you decided to do after you started training?
More the latter. I think I'm more kind of about the personal development and learning more than necessarily the fulfillment from competition.
Yeah.
I did compete because I recognized that I was only going to develop a certain aspect of my game through higher intensity stuff.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
so
But it's such a
I'm
huge
not
mental aspect to stepping into a ring.
right. So and also in preparing other fighters and stuff, it's important to have done a little bit yourself at least.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah. Kind of
so
have a
I'm
feel for.
not right. So I'm not a huge competitor myself,
Yeah.
but yeah, I've been through some fights, and I they're very good experiences overall. So
Yeah. So when you were getting ready for those, how would you prepare, or what was your training
pretty
schedule?
much follow my coach, and so my coach Matt, he had kind of a plan laid out.
Nice.
So first thing in order was to get in shape. So that's like a lot of cardio, and mostly
Yeah.
cardio is what you need for
Yeah.
your first couple amateur fights.
Is that for you? Is that jump rope and running, or what were you guys doing?
Mostly running, long distance running. Um,
Yeah.
and that was fine. Um, and then the camp was more about sharpening things that I was good at versus developing new things. And
Yeah.
so we're focusing a lot for me on like various kicks because I'm kind of like a kick specialist, or that's like the main part of my game.
Yeah. Yeah.
And also just like trouble points. So um, yeah, things that I would be likely to come across in a fight.
Yeah. And then and this, I guess, compared to your normal training, it probably was a lot more specific for the competition and probably a lot more cardio, I imagine.
Yeah, the intensity kind of ramps up, and then there's like the weight management aspect to it as well.
Yeah. Oh
Um,
man, cutting weight is no fun.
it's not too bad, but
Not for you. Yeah, I walk around a bit heavier than I need to be, so
yeah,
I always have a little bit to work off.
like one of the things that our gym does, which I don't know why other gyms don't do, is like we do a test weight cut. So you just do a weight cut before you need to, versus like having your first weight
Oh,
cut be with your first fight.
yeah, yeah. That's
Yeah.
interesting. And for the ones you were doing at that level, were you guys weighing in like the day of,
Day before.
day before? Oh, that's nice. You can hydrate at least.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would say like normally my training, like day to day outside of a fight camp, is more focused on learning new things or doing things I'm bad at, and then
Yeah.
the stuff in the fight camp is, I mean, it could include that, but it's really just like what am I most likely to do and what am I most likely to deal with.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. So very, very focused
Hmm.
on that experience. Um, so when you go to do your fight, is there anything you do to like kind of cool your nerves or keep yourself kind of focused, like during the right before the competition and all of that?
Um, Generally, I try to chill out with people that I enjoy chilling out with.
Yeah.
Um, so friends, my girlfriend, my coach. Listen to music. So for me, like, just in general, when I'm in a bad mood or I'm feeling weird in general, like I'll put on some kind of like heavy metal and things
Yeah.
like that, and like that calms me. Which I don't know,
Nice.
that's kind of weird, but
Yeah. 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 Sometimes like, something high tempo can do that. Um, what do you think is like the toughest part of like competition versus just being, sort of as opposed to just sort of training at your martial art? What's the hard part of stepping up to the competing experience?
for me personally, it was literally just like the wait, like
Okay.
the
Yeah.
anticipation was very
Oh yeah.
annoying.
Right.
Uh, the fight day itself was annoying because you have to get there early and just kind of wait around.
Yeah,
Um,
I've done that for smokers where I had to sit for like 3 4 hours before it was
yeah.
my turn.
Mhm.
Yeah, you just
I would
kind of.
say like going up to the competitions for me, I wasn't particularly nervous about my performance.
Yeah,
Sometimes I would be nervous if I, had some sort of injury or if I had like a rough day of sparring,
yeah,
that I would have to stop or something like that, or I would feel
yeah,
it during the fight. Um, Now it's different for everyone else, for each person. So some people like they really put a lot of pressure on themselves to perform well.
yeah,
Um, some people like the time commitment is a huge issue, but for me it wasn't. Neither of those things were that big.
yeah. Do you have a job or something that was able you were able to kind of work around your timing or school or something like that?
Yeah. So um, during the day, I'm a computer programmer, so I just kind of get to sit. Luckily, I don't need to do anything physically strenuous during work. So
So you could kind of recover at work.
yeah, I think the only thing that my work kind of suffered from was like during the weight cut. Like
Yeah.
I had to water load, so you drink a lot of water and then you taper it off. But at one point you're drinking like 2 gallons a day, so I was just
Oh
like
man.
getting up a lot to pee.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have any advice you offer for somebody who's preparing for their first fight?
Yeah, I would say um like cardio is number one. Like
Yeah.
it kind of sucks, but like if you have better cardio, you're probably gonna win.
Yeah, I've seen guys who were not that talented but amazing athletes just crush people who didn't have the cardio there. Yeah.
And then another thing is just like um, simulating the fight, and that doesn't mean like hard sparring all the time, but um, like if it's X minutes around with like a certain rule set, like
Yeah.
go towards that in training.
Right.
Um, so don't be surprised. So
Right. Yeah, I've heard this saying of train the way you fight. So if you're fighting 2.5 2 minute rounds, whatever, train 2 minute rounds. If you're
mhm,
gonna fight in headgear, train in headgear. Like so
right,
everything is the same. Yeah,
yeah,
that makes a lot of
and
sense.
and hopefully your fight camp and your training environment is conducive to that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So one of the um, some advice I got from a coaching clinic was uh, basically like each week treat your training as if you were like in a weightlifting program. So make it like pretty regimented. Kind of
Hmm.
have like a progression. So this fighter, Henry Cejudo, actually he would kind of divide his training into blocks of like, okay, this development work. This is like basically test, like in a software environment. Like I'm going into like staging or test, right? So,
Yeah.
uh, literally, like he would practice his walkout and
Oh, okay. Yeah.
like go into the ring and have that kind of mentality of like this is a day where like I feel like I'm competing.
Yeah.
um so it's not just hard sparring all the time, um but there has to be some component of like high pressure such that you're not surprised before this very stressful situation.
Yeah, for sure. I think that you probably don't want to get hard for the very first time in a competition.
Mhm.
Yeah. Um, so you said you help some folks prepare for their fights. I
Mhm.
was wondering how that goes and what kind of things you do.
Yeah, so a lot of it is pad work. A lot of it is
Yeah.
it's kind of like people management, really. It's like, okay, are they on top of their weight? Like, let's
Yeah.
kind of schedule a check-in system so we can check the weight, see how they're feeling, um, getting some sort of level of trust between me and the fighter, so that if something goes wrong, they're not going to be nervous and like avoid telling me. But
Right.
at the same time, like setting expectations so that they can't just like complain to me all the time because I don't really like
Yeah, yeah. It helps to be
that.
accountable to somebody.
Yeah. But yeah, a lot of it is the pad work, watching them during sparring.
Yeah,
I think prior to this year, a lot of my fight preparation for other fighters was being an active sparring partner or something like that.
yeah,
And that's
yeah.
one way you can do it. The other way you can do it is from a more coaching perspective where you're in the corner, you know, you record a video of them and you watch them and you see what they need to work on,
Yeah.
uh, what they're good at, what they're bad at, and building like a communication vocabulary between you and your fighters so that in their corner when you're yelling something, they can quickly process it and
Okay. Yeah,
do what they
yeah,
need
right.
to do, right?
Because their mind's pretty busy. Yeah,
Hmm. So, like
yeah,
one of the things that we tried this year was practicing cornering, which like normally when you're sparring and stuff in a gym environment, no one's like as a dedicated corner like telling you
right.
advice.
You just kind of have the peanut gallery
Mhm.
watching. Yeah,
Right. But it would just be like me on one guy, the fighter, the whole training session.
yeah,
And then I kind of got to figure out like what words worked, what words didn't.
yeah,
And then even the ones that didn't, my fighter eventually learned, what it meant.
yeah,
And so that was kind of a huge deal for me because prior to this, like we've been in situations where after the fight, maybe the performance could have been better. We talk about it. Or like, yeah, like you knew what to do, but like you weren't reminded at that time.
right.
And
Yeah.
and this year when we had one fight, it was like I was a puppet master, like I was playing a video game where I would just say
Oh,
something
wow. Yeah,
and the guy would do it. So that was really cool.
yeah.
Um,
That's
so that
interesting. You were talking about practicing cornering. I guess that's not a thing I thought about necessarily. Like whenever I'd cornered, I just kind of got thrown in. But it makes so much sense that you would practice it because it's like a skill in of its own. Its own, you know.
right, yeah, um, yeah. I
I
think
found Oh, sorry. Go
you
ahead.
know coaching and prepping people for fights. I think a lot of people like tend to just like throw hard work at their fighter
Yeah,
without necessarily thinking of like what they could have to be successful during the fight, and
I see.
that's like a good corner, a good understanding of what they need to do, like that discipline.
Yeah,
Discipline in martial arts is so often like implicitly developed versus like explicitly,
yeah,
you know. So
yeah. You'd mentioned also doing videos, like videoing of sparring and stuff, and I've definitely experienced that too, being super helpful. Because I had this experience of thinking I was doing things and moving a certain way, and then you see a video of yourself later, and it's like, wow, the way I was performing didn't line up with my mental image of what I was doing. And it was, yeah, I found it really useful for finding things I was doing wrong, dropping hands, that kind of thing.
yeah,
Um, yeah,
for sure.
yeah. Are there common mistakes you see beginners making, or people getting ready for fights and mistakes they might be making that you would point out?
Yeah, I think like um the biggest thing, especially for striking, is like fixating on moves.
Mm-hmm.
So like, oh, like I saw Israel Adesanya throw this really cool question mark kick. Like, let me like focus a lot of time on that. Well,
Yeah,
like if you really think about like the cost benefit analysis of that, like it's probably not gonna give you very
yeah,
much to work on that.
that makes sense.
Whereas working on like footwork or defense or a sense of distance will give you a lot of benefit.
Yeah, kind of the bread
Uh,
and butter stuff. I've
right.
I've heard people describe that for new folks. Sometimes it's almost better to train less specific techniques. So instead of having a million things in their head, focus on like a handful of strikes they can execute well, and work that in.
Yeah, I really think like I could train someone with just like a jab and a low kick, and then
Yeah,
they could win a fight. Like,
right. If you could
but
execute them well, yeah,
right, I think it's just like the general the general population like is gonna get bored, so they really like cool moves.
yeah,
They want to have a sense of progression, and it's easy to have that when you have like a list of combinations to learn,
yeah,
right? Like five
yeah,
coolest combos
yeah,
you
yeah.
could throw in your fight. Um,
I did see
plus,
that when coaching, with the level I was coaching at, people weren't using elbows in competition because it was kind of smokers, but we would put some elbows into the training just because people really enjoyed it. They
right,
wanted to learn it. And like you were saying, it kind of mixes up the experience a little bit, so they got something new. But I think when it
yeah,
came to fighter training, we would train them as they fought. So if they were fighting a fight that didn't use elbows, we wouldn't put that into their drills.
right. And I think that you know novelty and fun definitely is important. Like you want to keep your customer, your student, your fighter engaged.
Yeah,
But in an age of social media and just like striking sports in general, like we suffer a lot from like move fixation. I feel.
trying to do the flashy stuff.
Yeah, not even just flashy, but just like I feel like that's the primary mode of learning that a lot of
Yeah,
at least American gyms have is like, okay, guys, today we're going to do a combination,
yeah,
um, and so that like everyone is comfortable throwing combos, but when those combos don't land or you get hit, like it's unclear what to do because you don't have fundamentals.
yeah. Right. It's not so prescribed. I can't do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 if somebody interrupts me at three, and then I have to figure out on my own in real time what do I do now.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. I feel like sparring is great for that. Even like light sparring, as opposed to just doing pad work to give you that ability to start responding in real time, and then if you catch yourself in a bad situation, finding a way to get yourself into a better situation. Yeah, definitely true. So given the name of Pro Tip, we're going to ask you for your pro tip for any aspiring or new martial artists.
yeah. My specific pro tip. This is probably not like the number one advice I would give, but
Yeah,
something I feel like other people wouldn't say is watch fights and try to figure out why people got hit or taken down or submitted, instead of like thinking about like, oh, Mike Tyson has a really good left hook and he KO'd this guy. Like think about like why did that guy get KO'd? Like
I see.
what could he have done?
Right.
Um, so I think
So,
that will change a lot of things. That would change a lot of things for students who are
yeah,
more like fixated on moves, offense, and not very mindful of what the other person's gonna do.
that's what you're saying. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
great. Excuse me. Okay, I got a couple rapid fire questions for you here, and then we'll wrap it up. So one, do you have a favorite martial artist?
It's hard
It's a
to
tough one.
choose.
Yeah.
Nowadays, I don't really play favorites, but for a long time, it was Fedor Emelianenko.
Okay. Yeah.
Mhm.
And do you favorite walkout song?
I actually never got to walk out to a song that I
Uh,
wanted. So
if
if
you
I
could.
wanted, I like they asked for a walkout song, but they just didn't play it. So
Oh no.
um, if I had to walk out to a song now, it might be um, "Don't Let Me Be Misunderstood" by Santa Esmeralda.
Okay, I'll put a link in the video description.
Yeah.
And favorite boxing glove?
I like my Top King bag gloves a lot.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, the bag gloves are fun. Yeah. And favorite exercise?
Uh, honestly, not too much of an exercise guy, but
Yeah.
um, I
Or
probably
maybe
enjoy. enjoy, what's it called, like the Olympic lift,
Okay.
the clean jerk,
Clean and
whatever.
jerk. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that one is
And,
like
so,
kind of fun.
and then I guess the inverse is the least favorite exercise.
Um, I would say just straight push-ups. I am not a big
Yeah.
fan.
Oh yeah. A little boring. Nice. Well, hey, thanks for talking to me. This has been great.